History books tell us humanity began with simple hunters and gatherers, slowly mastering fire, farming, and the wheel. But beneath that familiar story runs another current, one carved in myth, stone, and forbidden texts. Ancient scrolls speak of angels who broke their vows, of giants who devoured the earth, of floods that erased worlds older than our own. Temples like Göbekli Tepe rise from deep time, thousands of years before Egypt, as though built with knowledge that should not have existed. Stones at Baalbek weigh more than 1,000 tons, moved with a precision even modern machines strain to match. And across continents, cultures separated by oceans all insist the same thing. Civilization was not invented, but bestowed. Perhaps our true origin is not a climb from ignorance, but a rebirth after cataclysm, guided by hands we no longer see. Perhaps fragments of forbidden knowledge still linger in ruins, waiting for us to listen. Tonight, let us walk into that mystery together. Night settles across the ancient world, and with it comes the silence of forgotten ages. Imagine lying beneath a vast sky, the constellations glittering above, while the earth beneath carries secrets it no longer speaks aloud. We are taught a story of beginnings, of fire discovered, of villages forming, of a slow climb from caves to cities. It is comforting in its simplicity, a neat line of progress drawn across time. But beneath that line, beneath the textbooks and timelines, another current flows. Myths murmur of a different story, one of gods, giants, and floods that erased entire ages. They whisper that humanity was not the first, nor the only, to walk this path. Across cultures, the same pattern repeats. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets tell of Utnapishtim, chosen to survive a flood that destroyed the world. In India, Manu is warned by a great fish to build a vessel and preserve life. The Greeks remember Deucalion and Pyrrha, who cast stones behind them that turned into men and women after the waters receded. The Maya tell of wooden people swept away by floods and replaced by humans made of maize. Even the Bible speaks of Noah, carrying animals 2 by 2 into an ark, too many echoes to dismiss as coincidence. Geology lends its own testimony. Around 12,000 years ago, at the close of the Ice Age, glaciers melted with ferocity, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet. Vast plains vanished beneath the oceans. The Black Sea filled in a catastrophic rush of water. Ancient coastlines now lie submerged, their ruins, if they exist, locked in silence beneath the waves. Science and myth, when laid side by side, form a haunting symmetry, memory of floods and evidence of floods. Yet what unsettles most is not the water, but what came before it. Nearly every culture insists that prior to these cataclysms, there existed knowledge, power, or beings unlike any that followed. The Book of Enoch speaks of watchers descending from the heavens, sharing forbidden arts. The Sumerians remembered the Anunnaki, those who taught agriculture, astronomy, and kingship. Egypt preserved the legend of Zep-Tepi, the first time when gods ruled beside men. These are not tales of primitive tribes, but of civilizations already mature, already advanced, swept away and buried under layers of mud and myth. If history is truly a straight line, why do all these accounts circle back to the same motifs? Floods, gods, forbidden knowledge, survival. Could it be that our neat narrative is merely the surface, while beneath lies a cycle of rise, destruction, and rebirth? The true origin of humanity may not be in the caves of prehistory, but in the ruins of a world erased. And so we begin with whispers. Whispers carried in scripture, myth, and stone. Whispers that defy the tidy borders of official history, hinting at civilizations that rose before ours, and knowledge deemed too dangerous to survive the flood. In these whispers lies the seed of our journey, to follow the echoes back through time, to listen for what was silenced, and to see whether the truth of humanity lies not in invention, but in remembrance. The question now is, who first dared to record such forbidden memory, and why did later ages bury it in silence? On a barren cliff above the Dead Sea, shepherds once stumbled into a cave while chasing a lost goat. Inside they found jars filled with scrolls, fragile, brittle, yet miraculously preserved through millennia. When scholars unrolled them, they discovered not only the familiar voices of Scripture, but something stranger. Among hymns and laws lay the Book of Enoch, a text long excluded from the Bible, whispered of by early Christians and preserved in the Ethiopian church. It was more than prophecy. It was a chronicle of encounters with beings from beyond. The Book of Enoch describes the descent of the Watchers, celestial beings tasked with observing humanity. But they broke their oath. Drawn to human daughters, they descended to earth, taking wives and teaching forbidden knowledge. From these unions were born the Nephilim, giants who consumed the fruits of men, devoured livestock, and, as the text darkly notes, turned to cannibalism when famine struck. These were not allegories to inspire moral lessons. Enoch writes with startling precision, naming mountains, rivers, and stars, as though he had seen them from a vantage point higher than Earth itself. Imagine the scene as Enoch describes it. Towering figures moving through fields, their shadows stretching across villages. Crops vanish, herds are slaughtered, and hunger gnaws at entire communities. Then, in desperation, these giants turn against humankind itself. Their presence is painted not as blessing, but as a distortion of the natural order, a living reminder of boundaries broken. Where human and divine should remain apart, something new emerged. Beings too strong, too hungry, too violent to belong. The Watchers themselves do not escape judgment. Bound by oath to remain observers, they instead become transgressors. They teach metallurgy, sorcery, enchantments, and the secrets of the stars. Some reveal the use of plants, not for healing alone but for poison and power. Others share knowledge of charms and spells, opening doors humanity may not have been ready to walk through. To us, these details sound like fragments of early science, astronomy, medicine, chemistry. But to the ancients, they were dangerous gifts, leaping humanity forward in ways that also courted disaster. In Enoch's visions, this misuse of knowledge provokes cries from humanity that rise into the heavens. The great archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, are sent to intervene. The Watchers are cast into darkness, chained beneath mountains, awaiting a day of final judgment. Their offspring, the Nephilim, are doomed to perish in the flood that sweeps across the earth. Only Enoch himself is spared. Unlike other men, he does not die. Instead, he is taken into the heavens in a chariot of fire, carried aloft so that his testimony will not be lost. Why was this book excluded from the biblical canon? Early church fathers like Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria cited it as sacred, yet by the 4th century it vanished from mainstream scripture. Perhaps it spoke too openly of angels as flawed, too directly of humanity shaped by outside forces. To acknowledge it would mean admitting that our story began not solely by divine creation or human evolution, but by mingling with beings neither fully of heaven nor of earth. Even the language of the text defies dismissal. Enoch does not write in vague parables, but in descriptions that feel like testimony. He names Mount Hermon as the place where the Watchers swore their oath. He describes chambers of the heavens, storehouses of winds, and the paths of stars as if guided through a cosmic observatory. His words are not the vague poetry of legend but precise accounts, as though he saw machinery of creation itself. The Ethiopian church preserved the Book of Enoch when all others abandoned it. For centuries, it remained unknown in the West, resurfacing only in the 18th century when a copy was brought from Abyssinia. Imagine the shock of scholars reading a text that filled in the gaps left by Genesis. A story of giants, of angelic rebellion, of knowledge unleashed too soon. Suddenly, a hidden cosmology revealed itself, one that cast the early chapters of humanity not as innocence lost, but as manipulation endured. And beyond Ethiopia, the echoes spread wider. In Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki descend from the heavens, imparting knowledge of kingship and agriculture. In Greek myths, gods take mortal lovers, producing demigods of immense power. In Ireland, the Fomorians arrive as monstrous giants, demanding tribute and reshaping the land. Even the Norse recall frost giants older than the gods themselves, beings of immense strength whose destruction was necessary for order to emerge. Cultures separated by oceans and centuries repeat the same story. A union between heaven and earth, the birth of hybrid beings, and the eventual catastrophe that sweeps them away. If these were only archetypes of imagination, why do they converge so precisely on the same details? Giants, forbidden knowledge, floods. If myth is memory distorted, then perhaps the Book of Enoch is one of the clearest fragments of that memory, naming names, listing places, and offering testimony of what humanity once endured. What unsettles most is the implication that humanity did not rise alone. We may be heirs not only to survival, but to intrusion, to knowledge given, withdrawn, and hidden. If Enoch's testimony is true, then our origin is less a story of invention and more a story of inheritance, shaped by beings whose chains still lie beneath the mountains, waiting. And though the Nephilim are said to have perished, their shadow remains. The Book of Enoch whispers that their spirits linger as wandering presences, denied heaven yet unable to rest on earth. Shadows that plague mankind still. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the message is clear. Humanity carries scars from encounters with forces beyond itself. Thus the scrolls, pulled from desert caves after millennia of silence, reopen a door long closed. They whisper of a time when the line between mortal and divine blurred, when knowledge came not in sparks of discovery, but in floods of revelation, and when the price of those revelations was destruction. The Book of Enoch is not only a hidden scripture, it is a reminder that our story begins with interventions we no longer dare to name, a reminder that what is forbidden may still linger, waiting for another age to uncover, and a reminder that the origins of humanity are not only human. Legends tell of towering figures who strode across the land with steps so vast they shook the ground. They are remembered not as abstractions, but as beings of flesh and bone. The Bible speaks of the Anakim, so large that the Israelites compared themselves to grasshoppers in their sight. Irish tales recall Fionn McCumhall, builder of the Giant's Causeway, his footsteps frozen into hexagonal basalt columns that stretch into the sea. Norse sagas speak of the Jötnar, frost giants whose bones became the mountains and whose blood became the rivers of the world. Far away in the Andes, the Inca described enormous beings who came by sea, devouring crops and people alike, until Viracocha, the radiant god, struck them down with fire from the heavens. To modern ears, these tales sound allegorical, metaphors for the forces of chaos or for the terror of nature. Yet what if they are not? What if they are memories passed down in stories of beings who truly once walked the earth? Generations repeated their presence until myth clothed them in exaggeration, but at the core lay encounters with something real. Accounts from explorers reinforce the persistence of these memories. Marco Polo described men of enormous stature in Zanzibar. Antonio Pigafetta, chronicler of Magellan's voyage, wrote of the Patagonians, giants so tall that even the tallest sailors barely reached their waist. In North America, settlers recorded stories of unusually tall tribes encountered in the wilderness, some with red hair, others with massive bones displayed by local peoples as proof of their existence. 19th century American newspapers are filled with reports of giant skeletons unearthed from burial mounds, femurs longer than a man's leg, skulls of abnormal size, entire skeletons measuring over 8 feet. Most of these reports vanished into obscurity, the remains quietly reburied, stored away, or dismissed as hoaxes. Yet the sheer number of such accounts piles up like stones in a wall, too many to ignore. Archaeology itself leaves behind unsettling puzzles. In Baalbek, Lebanon, the trilithon stones weigh more than 1,000 tons each. Their sheer mass defies explanation, even with today's machinery. Legends insist they were placed by giants, beings for whom such feats were not extraordinary but ordinary. In Egypt's necropolis of Saqqara, massive granite sarcophagi lie in darkened chambers, their lids ajar, their interiors empty. Each is large enough to hold a body far taller than any human. Were these ceremonial coffins, or did they once contain remains now lost to time? In Siberia's Mount Shoria, colossal blocks of granite weighing thousands of tons sit stacked in what appears to be a deliberate pattern. Explanations of natural fracture strain under the weight of their geometry. Imagine walking among these stones, feeling the cold surfaces beneath your hand, trying to imagine ropes, pulleys, or levers strong enough to shift them. The mind strains against the evidence. These stones exist. They were moved and they were placed. If not by ordinary human means, then by what? Local traditions give the same answer: giants. What is striking is how often these giants are remembered not as benevolent guardians, but as devourers. In the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim consume crops, livestock, and eventually human flesh. In Irish myths, the Fomorians demand tribute and sacrifices, tormenting the land until overthrown. In the Andes, the giants bring terror until fire from heaven destroys them. The theme repeats. Their presence destabilizes the world, their appetites too vast, their strength too overwhelming. Their downfall is remembered not as tragedy, but as necessity. And yet, their traces linger in the earth itself. Across Europe, giants' graves dot the landscape, massive megalithic tombs attributed by folklore to beings too large for ordinary men. In the Caucasus, legends of ancient long-boned kings persist, their names carved in fading inscriptions. In the Pacific, tales of massive stone foundations are said to be the remains of houses built for giants who once ruled the islands. Everywhere, geography is stitched with myth, as though the land itself remembers their weight. Skeptics argue these are symbolic, representing natural forces or tribal enemies recast as monsters. But the consistency of detail is haunting. Why giants? Why the same motifs of enormous size, voracious appetite, and sudden destruction? If imagination alone created them, why do they appear in such similar form across cultures, divided by oceans and centuries? Perhaps giants once existed as hybrids, the offspring of gods and humans, as Enoch claimed. Perhaps they were a race apart, remnants of an earlier age swept away by flood. Or perhaps they were symbolic echoes of real people of unusual size, remembered and magnified across generations. Whatever the truth, their presence in memory suggests that humanity once lived in the shadow of beings larger than ourselves. Standing before the massive stones of Baalbek or the silent sarcophagi of Saqqara, one cannot help but feel dwarfed, as if the monuments themselves were meant for a scale beyond human. Whether myth or memory, these whispers of giants remind us that the world we walk may once have belonged to others. The true origin of humanity, then, may not be found only in the rise of small villages and the taming of fire, but in survival. Survival in a world where larger beings once walked. Survival after they vanished, leaving only echoes in stone and story. Their shadows stretch across myth and monument alike, haunting us still. On the plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, a sudden brilliance appeared around 5,000 years ago. Villages became cities almost overnight, and with them came writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, and kingship. The Sumerians, often called the inventors of civilization, seem to arrive fully formed, their tablets already filled with wedge-shaped script, their temples already aligned to the heavens. Archaeologists marvel at this leap, but within Sumerian texts themselves, the explanation was clear. Knowledge was given, not discovered. The Sumerian king list preserves a chronology unlike anything in official history. It begins not with ordinary rulers, but with kings whose reigns lasted tens of thousands of years. These figures ruled, it says, before the flood. After the flood, their reigns shortened, but still carried the aura of divine inheritance. The tablets attribute kingship itself to the Anunnaki, those who came down from the heavens. These were not distant gods watching from clouds, but beings who walked among men, establishing cities like Eridu, and Uruk. The myths describe the Anunnaki as seekers of gold, a material not prized for ornament, but for survival. Their workers, the Igigi, rebelled after long toil, refusing to mine further. To solve this crisis, the god Enki proposed the creation of a new race. Humans, formed from clay, but given life through divine essence. The Adamu, the first of men, were made to serve, to carry the labour that the gods rejected. Compare this to the biblical Adam, formed from dust and breathed into by God, and the parallels are too close to ignore. Was humanity born not of chance but of design, created for purpose? Even more unsettling are the descriptions of the Anunnaki themselves. Tall, radiant, long-lived, carved into stone with wings and curious devices on their wrists, they appear not as abstractions but as rulers and teachers. Some carry objects resembling pine cones pressed to the tree of life. Others stand beside symbols that look like modern instruments. To the Sumerians, these were realities, not metaphors. And from them, kingship descended. The Epic of Gilgamesh, carved into clay in Nineveh, echoes the same themes. Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal, seeks immortality after hearing the tale of the great flood from Utnapishtim. Here, the boundaries between myth and memory blur. Giants, floods, hybrid rulers, and forbidden quests, all entwined in a single narrative that feels too elaborate to be invention alone. If the Sumerians were heirs to a lost civilization, then their brilliance is not evidence of a beginning, but of a continuation. Their sudden mastery of irrigation, astronomy, and writing suggests fragments of knowledge carried through cataclysm, knowledge preserved by survivors or bestowed by beings remembered as gods. When we walk through the ruins of Uruk or gaze at the ziggurats rising from the desert, we are not just looking at humanity's first steps, but perhaps at the afterglow of something older. The first Sumerians may not have been inventors, but stewards, servants or heirs of knowledge that was already ancient. The question lingers in the dust of their tablets. Were they recording their own history, or remembering a legacy given to them from those who came before the flood? Water has always been both life and death. It nourishes the fields, carves valleys, and sustains civilization. Yet in myth and geology alike, it also destroys. When cultures as distant as Mesopotamia, India, Greece, and the Americas all tell of catastrophic floods, the question becomes not whether the flood happened, but how many times and what it swept away. The Epic of Atrahasis, one of Mesopotamia's oldest stories, tells of gods angered by humanity's noise. They send famine, plague, and at last a deluge. Only Atrahasis, warned by the god Enki, survives by building a great vessel. His story is echoed in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Utnapishtim carries his family and animals through a flood that destroys mankind. In the Hebrew tradition, this becomes Noah, chosen by God to preserve life. In India, Manu is guided by a giant fish who warns him of rising waters. The Greeks tell of Deucalion and Pyrrha, casting stones that become new people after the flood subsides. The Maya speak of wooden people swept away by rains, replaced by humans made of maize. The Polynesians remember great waves that drowned whole islands, leaving only those who found refuge on high ground. The patterns are striking. Each culture insists on destruction, survival, and rebirth. The details shift with geography, but the heart of the story remains the same. Always there is a warning. Always there is a vessel, a mountain, or a place of refuge. And always there is a chosen figure or family who carries memory into the new world. Science too bears witness. Sediment layers in Mesopotamian cities show sudden deposits of river mud, several feet thick, lying between levels of human habitation. Around the Black Sea, geological studies suggest a catastrophic influx of seawater 7,500 years ago, flooding a vast freshwater lake with salt water in a surge that would have sounded like the roar of 1,000 waterfalls. At the close of the last ice age, glaciers melted so rapidly that sea levels surged by more than 100 meters, drowning coastal plains where human settlements surely existed. Imagine vast tracts of fertile land, Doggerland in the North Sea, Sunderland in Southeast Asia, the now submerged Gulf of Kambat, all lost beneath the waves. If civilizations had risen there, their ruins are now silent, hidden under centuries of silt and tide. What makes these stories compelling is what follows the destruction. Survivors do not wander in ignorance. They reappear carrying knowledge. Manu transmits the hymns of the Vedas. Utnapishtim recalls the wisdom of the gods. Noah plants vineyards and establishes laws. In Egypt, 7 sages emerge after the flood to restore order. In Mesopotamia, the Apkallu, part divine figures, rise from the waters to teach writing and agriculture. In the Andes, Viracocha appears after fire and flood, bringing civilization to scattered survivors. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl teaches astronomy and agriculture after waters recede. Always the same motif: catastrophe, remnant, renewal. If myths were only metaphors for resilience, their details would differ wildly. Yet they converge not only on floods, but on the idea that knowledge was carried through disaster, as though guarded deliberately. Could it be that ancient survivors, whether human or something more, planted seeds of wisdom in the New World? Was civilization not invented anew, but reseeded from fragments of a lost age? Imagine the scene at the end of such a cataclysm: waters retreating, leaving behind silence and desolation. Villages erased, fields drowned, monuments toppled. And yet among the survivors, memory lingers. They remember the arts of farming, the rhythms of stars, the laws of gods. Slowly, they rebuild. They raise new temples, plant new seeds, and re-establish rituals. To later generations, it looks like the dawn of civilization. But to those who endured, it is only a continuation, fragments salvaged from the wreckage. The flood, then, was not only an ending, it was an eraser, wiping away evidence of a world before, leaving only scattered whispers, scattered ruins, and scattered memories. But it was also a threshold. On one side lay giants, gods, and forbidden unions. On the other, the fragile rebirth of humanity. Survivors became bridges, carrying the memory of a civilization too great, too dangerous, or too different to continue unchanged. Across traditions, the same figure emerges, the one who preserves life and knowledge. Noah with his ark, Manu with his boat, Atrahasis with his vessel, Deucalion with his stones. These survivors are not just chosen to endure, they are chosen to carry forward fragments of a greater past. They are custodians of memory, guardians of knowledge, and progenitors of the next age. The memory of floods lingers, not merely as tales of punishment, but as reminders of cycles. Civilizations rise, misuse their gifts, and fall into catastrophe. From their ashes, survivors rebuild, carrying fragments of wisdom into a new age. Perhaps our story is not one of invention, but of inheritance, of knowledge preserved through disaster, waiting for humanity to remember. As rivers carved new valleys and oceans swallowed ancient coasts, myths carried the warning forward. Our story may not have begun in simplicity, but in survival. Humanity as we know it may be the remnant of something older, something erased by water, yet not completely lost. And if floods are cycles, not singular events, then the question stirs like distant thunder. What else lies beneath the seas, waiting to be remembered? The Nile flows calmly through its valley, a ribbon of life in a land of stone and sand. Along its banks rose temples, obelisks, and pyramids that still defy explanation. To conventional history, Egypt's monuments are the product of gradual mastery, built as tombs for ambitious pharaohs. Yet within Egypt's own memory lies another account, one that stretches far beyond dynasties. The story of Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods walked among men and taught them the arts of civilization. At the heart of this memory is Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, mathematics, and writing. He was not merely a deity of scribes, but a cosmic figure credited with measuring the heavens, regulating time, and recording the will of the gods. Ancient inscriptions call him the Lord of the Divine Words, the one who preserved balance by keeping knowledge intact. In Greek tradition, Thoth became Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great, a teacher of alchemy, astronomy, and the hidden laws of the universe. In Arabic lore, he is Idris, a prophet who ascended bodily into the heavens, remembered for his mastery of sacred sciences. Across cultures, the names change, but the essence remains, a sage who stands between heaven and earth, guardian of wisdom too great to lose. Legends tell that before the Great Flood, Thoth foresaw the coming disaster. To preserve knowledge, he inscribed it upon indestructible tablets of emerald and concealed them within chambers of stone. These so-called emerald tablets of Thoth would later inspire hermetic traditions, said to contain the principles of creation itself. as above, so below. While Arab chroniclers like al-Makrizi claimed that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, but a vault built under Thoth's guidance, filled with scrolls and devices from the age before. Within its passages, they said, lay secrets of astronomy, geometry, and divine law, knowledge intended to outlast flood, fire, and empire. Even the design of the pyramid speaks of a deeper purpose. The Great Pyramid of Giza aligns to true north with an accuracy astonishing for its supposed age. Its shafts point toward Orion's belt and Sirius, constellations tied to rebirth, to Osiris, and to the cyclical journey of souls. Its dimensions encode mathematical constants, pi, the golden ratio, and the circumference of the earth scaled in stone. Were these coincidences or deliberate inscriptions of cosmic law etched into geometry so that no flood could erase them? Egyptian texts echo the same themes found in Sumer and Enoch: floods, forbidden unions, divine rulers. The pyramid texts speak of gods who ruled in the first time, their harmony broken by calamity. Afterward, sages and survivors restored order along the Nile. Some accounts describe 7 beings, fish-like or radiant, who emerged after the waters, mirroring the Apkallu of Mesopotamia and the Saptarishi of India. Always the same number, always the same role: to replant civilization where it had been destroyed. Imagine the scene: the Nile Valley drowned in waters, then receding to reveal desolation. Into this silence, figures appear, tall, luminous, cloaked in feathers or scales. They teach the survivors how to plant, how to measure the heavens, how to raise temples that mirror the stars. These are not inventions but restorations, fragments of memory preserved and delivered again. Thoth himself is surrounded by devices that sound eerily technological. Legends speak of a mirror that could see across distances, a bird that could sing news from afar, and tablets inscribed with unbreakable substance. To one age they are magic, to another they sound like echoes of tools, telescopes, communicators, crystalline records, misremembered by generations who lack the words to describe them. Even the Book of the Dead owes its existence to Thoth. He is said to have authored the spells that guide souls through the underworld, a map of the afterlife written as if it were a geography as real as the Nile. In myth, Thoth stands at the scales, weighing hearts against the feather of Ma'at, recording the fate of each soul. He is not merely a scribe, but a cosmic accountant, ensuring that memory, justice, and balance endure. The parallels to Enoch are striking. Both are described as men, or sages, who did not die but were taken into heaven alive. Both are shown visions of cosmic chambers, cycles of stars, and the laws of creation. Both act as mediators, recording the transgressions of divine beings who broke the boundary between heaven and earth. To some traditions, they are the same figure remembered under different names, their story fractured across languages, yet rooted in a shared memory of the first time. If Egypt preserved memory from an earlier world, its monuments may be more than expressions of power. They may be messages, reminders in stone that civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, carrying fragments of forbidden wisdom forward. The ibis-headed Thoth, the scribe of eternity, seems to tell us that what was once hidden will one day be revealed. Beneath the sands, secrets may still lie sealed. Unopened chambers beneath the Sphinx, subterranean passages rumoured under the pyramids, whispers of libraries lost to time. What might be discovered if these vaults are opened, if emerald tablets or forgotten scrolls are unearthed? Could they reveal that Egypt was not the beginning of civilization, but a rebirth of something older, something that survived flood and fire? Egypt's memory of Thoth is not only myth, it is testimony. Testimony carved in stone, painted on temple walls, encoded in the stars above the desert. To dismiss it as legend is to ignore a tradition that insists humanity's knowledge did not start from nothing. It began with fragments carried across a cataclysm, fragments guarded by sages, fragments we still struggle to understand. What lies sealed beneath the sands, in unopened chambers, in buried scrolls, in forgotten vaults, may yet speak of that first time. And perhaps it is no coincidence that the next clues to this story lead us to a recurring motif that spans continents: the appearance of 7 sages who rebuild after disaster. Across the ruins of time, one motif emerges with uncanny persistence. After flood, fire, or cosmic upheaval, 7 figures arrive. They are not described as ordinary men. They are radiant, strange, sometimes cloaked in feathers, sometimes in fish scales, sometimes descending from the sky. Always they come when the world is broken, and always they carry knowledge to begin again. In Mesopotamia, they were the Apkallu, 7 sages sent by the gods, half human, half divine, who emerged from the waters to teach writing, agriculture, and sacred ritual. Their images were carved into stone guardians placed at temple doorways, long-bearded men with wings or fish cloaks, hands raised in gestures of protection. Archaeologists find them again and again in the ruins of Assyrian palaces, as if rulers feared that without their memory, the world might collapse once more. In India, the Saptarishi, the 7 rishis, are remembered as the mind-born sons of Brahma. When the flood of Manu subsided, these sages preserved the hymns of the Vedas, passing them on to humanity so that the sacred sound would not be lost. Each rishi is linked to a star of Ursa Major, the Great Bear, a constellation visible in every season. It is as if the heavens themselves were chosen as a cosmic archive, ensuring that even if temples fall, the stars would remind humanity of their teachers. The Dogon people of Mali tell of the Nomo, amphibious beings who descended in a fiery vessel that spun like a wheel. They taught weaving, agriculture, and astronomy, describing in detail the invisible star Sirius B and its long orbit, knowledge that should have been impossible without telescopes. The Dogon still honor them with ceremonies, dancing in costumes that mimic fish-like forms, remembering the moment when sky and water joined to bring wisdom. In the Andes, Viracocha strides across myth. Tall, bearded, clothed in white, he appears after a flood and teaches scattered tribes how to farm, how to build, how to live with law and order. He carves rivers with his staff, raises stones into walls, then vanishes across the Pacific, promising to return. Local people point to ruins like Tiahuanaco and Pumapunku as the works of his hands, stones too heavy for human effort alone. Mesoamerica remembers Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. He brings corn, calendars, and astronomy. He instructs priests to align temples with Venus, teaching cycles of time that still astonish scholars. Yet like Viracocha, he departs mysteriously, journeying across the sea, leaving behind the promise of return. His figure is carved into temple walls, plumed and radiant, half man, half god, a memory of one who came after destruction to restore order. Even Greece preserves the theme. The 7 sages of antiquity, figures like Solon and Thales, are remembered for shaping philosophy, law, and the foundations of classical civilization. Though less mythical than their counterparts, their symbolic grouping as 7 feels like an echo, as if Europe too carried fragments of an older memory. Why always 7? In myth, the number is sacred. The 7 stars of the Pleiades, the 7 days of creation, the 7 heavens. It represents completeness, a cosmic cycle. Perhaps ancient storytellers chose 7 because it mirrored the heavens. Or perhaps there truly were 7, survivors of a cataclysm who travelled across the world, scattering seeds of knowledge like starlight across the continents. Imagine standing in the aftermath of a world undone by flood or fire, the air heavy with silence, fields drowned, villages erased. Then 7 figures emerge, luminous, uncanny, carrying staffs, tablets, or songs. They teach survivors how to plant seeds again, how to chart the stars, how to remember what was lost. They are not conquerors but guides, not gods but something more than human. To those who met them, they must have seemed as if the heavens themselves had walked upon the earth. What is most haunting is the consistency of their description. Luminous, amphibious, feathered, radiant. Figures who never fully belong to the human world they enter. To some they are gods. To others, ancestors. To us, they may be the guardians of a chapter erased. If humanity has always been guided after catastrophe, then our story is not only one of survival, but of transmission. The true origin of humanity may lie less in invention than in remembrance, carried by sages whose faces we no longer know but whose echoes shape every culture. The persistence of this pattern raises a question. Were the sages mortals, survivors of an advanced but fallen civilization? Were they hybrids, descendants of unions described in the Book of Enoch? Or were they something stranger, visitors from beyond, who appeared only when catastrophe forced a new beginning? The myths leave the door open. And if sages were the teachers, what of the monuments they inspired? Structures designed not to perish like flesh or parchment, but to endure beyond flood and fire. For across the earth, in stone too heavy to move and alignments too precise to dismiss, we find what may be their silent time capsules. Across continents, the earth rises into shapes too precise, too vast, and too aligned with the heavens to be accidents of primitive stonework. These monuments are not simply ruins of ambition, but silent messages, preserved against the erosion of memory. They endure where parchment rots and voices fade, standing as stone-bound witnesses to a past older than history allows. In the hills of southeastern Turkey lies Göbekli Tepe, buried for millennia beneath layers of soil. Its T-shaped pillars, carved with foxes, scorpions and birds, rise in circles aligned to celestial events. Archaeologists date it to nearly 12,000 years ago, long before writing, long before cities. Officially, it was built by hunter-gatherers just emerging from the Ice Age. Yet its sophistication, its geometry, its astronomical precision suggest knowledge beyond its time. Why build such a site only to bury it? Was it sealed as a vault, a memory planted for a future age? In the Andes, Pumapunku lies scattered with blocks so finely cut that a blade of metal cannot slide between them. Some weigh hundreds of tons, quarried from miles away, shaped with angles that resemble modern machining. Official explanations invoke hammer and chisel, yet the stones resist simplicity. Local myths insist they were placed by Viracocha's servants after the flood, gods or sages rebuilding in stone what would not survive in flesh. Far to the north, Stonehenge marks solstices with eerie accuracy. Its stones align with sunrise and sunset on the longest and shortest days of the year, a calendar written in megaliths. Across the seas, on Easter Island, the Moai stare inland, colossal figures carved from volcanic rock, their size defying the limits of rope and manpower. The Rapa Nui say they represent ancestors who walked with giants, infused with mana, a force of knowledge and power. Beneath the waves, hints of other time capsules stir. Off the coast of Japan, at Yonaguni, terraces and steps lie submerged. Some claim they are natural, but their geometry suggests design. If so, they may be the remains of a city drowned at the end of the Ice Age, left as a warning that seas rise and civilizations vanish. Plato's Atlantis, swallowed in a single day and night, may not have been fantasy, but memory. What unites these sites is not only their scale, but their orientation toward the heavens. The pyramids of Giza align with Orion's belt, just as the temples of Teotihuacan in Mexico do. Göbekli Tepe points to Sirius, the same star sacred to Egypt and inexplicably known to the Dogon. Again and again, ancient builders anchored their monuments to the sky, as though they wished to remind us that what was above once walked below. If sages preserved knowledge in story, perhaps they also inscribed it in stone, a record meant to endure floods, wars, and forgetfulness. The monuments may not be tombs, temples, or fortresses alone. They may be vaults, star maps, or machines of memory, speaking a language of geometry and light that waits for us to listen. To stand among them is to feel time-fold, as though the builders are still present, whispering through angles and alignments. Perhaps that was their purpose, to remind future generations that we are not the first nor the only to reach toward the heavens. And yet, if these monuments are messages, what story do they tell? Their silence suggests warning as much as wonder. For many myths agree, the builders were not just sages, but beings locked in conflict, gods and giants at war, their struggles reshaping the world we inherited. Thunder rolls across myth, echoing battles fought at the dawn of memory. In Greece, it is the Titanomachy, when the young Olympian gods rose against the Titans, beings of immense size and primeval power. The struggle shook mountains and churned seas. Lightning clashed against stone, and the defeated Titans were hurled into Tartarus, chained in shadow beneath the earth. This was not merely a tale of rebellion, but a story of an older order being violently overthrown by a new one. In Norse sagas, the Jötnar wage endless struggle against the Aesir, the gods of Asgard. Their war is cosmic, their scale immense. The giants embody raw chaos, frost and fire, sea and storm, while the gods carve order from their bodies. Ymir, the first giant, is slain, and from his bones and blood the world itself is fashioned. Yet even after creation, the Jötnar remain, hurling threats against the gods until Ragnarok, when Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, breaks his chains and the world burns before being born anew. The Hebrew tradition tells of the Nephilim, children of the Watchers and human women. Their strength fills the earth with violence until the flood wipes them away. Yet remnants survive. The Anakim and Rephaim linger in Canaan, remembered as foes so tall that the Israelites trembled. Goliath, clad in bronze and towering over David, is remembered not as a metaphor but as a warrior whose defeat marked the end of a race. Across oceans the echoes return. The Inca recall giants who came from the sea, devouring crops and people until Viracocha destroyed them with fire from above. The Aztec myths tell of earlier suns, ages when giants roamed the earth before being swept away in catastrophe. The Hopi remember the Palatquapi, red-haired giants who enslaved their ancestors, only to be overthrown when balance was restored. Native tribes of North America speak of battles against towering enemies, their bones displayed as proof, their defeat celebrated in story. Why do nearly all traditions portray these beings as violent, ravenous, or hubristic? If giants were only symbols of chaos, surely some cultures would remember them as noble. Yet again and again, their appetites are too vast, their ambition too great, their threat to humanity undeniable. Their destruction becomes not a tragedy, but a necessity for the survival of mankind. Archaeological mysteries deepen the intrigue. At Baalbek, where stones weighing over 1,000 tons lie perfectly set, legends insist giants raised them. In Egypt's Saqqara, sarcophagi vast enough for giant bodies lie open, their lids pushed aside as though something within once escaped or was removed. In North America, 19th century newspapers record the discovery of giant skeletons, some over 8 feet tall, unearthed in burial mounds before vanishing into obscurity. Were these hoaxes, exaggerations, or glimpses of a chapter history prefers to forget? The wars between gods and giants may have been more than allegories of order conquering chaos. They could be distorted memories of real upheavals, when beings larger or stronger than humankind dominated the earth. The thunderbolts of Zeus may echo ancient weapons of fire. The burning skies of Viracocha may recall celestial impacts or technologies unleashed in desperation. The flood that followed the Nephilim may have been not only judgment, but cleansing, a reset to sweep away a race that threatened creation itself. Imagine the world caught in such conflict, mountains trembling under the weight of combat, seas boiling as fire rained from the sky, cities of stone crumbling under blows too powerful for human arms. Humanity would not be the central actor in such battles. We would be the witnesses, fragile, terrified, struggling only to endure until the storm passed. Survivors, not victors. Yet the myths also whisper of inheritance. Though the giants are destroyed, fragments of their bloodline linger in kings and heroes. Though the gods withdraw, they leave behind laws, rituals, and fragments of wisdom. Even in destruction, something is passed on. The wars of gods and giants are not simply endings, but transitions, thresholds from one age to the next. The persistence of these myths suggests they preserve more than fantasy. They may be memories of cosmic cycles, of struggles between forces that shaped not only human destiny, but the earth itself. To remember them is to glimpse a world where humanity was small, a bystander in a drama of titans and gods, surviving only to inherit what was left behind. And in the ruins of these battles, one theme emerges again and again: knowledge. The giants misused it, the gods guarded it, humanity received it in fragments, dangerous and incomplete. Which leads us to the next chapter of this story, the double-edged gift of forbidden knowledge, a flame that enlightens even as it burns. It begins not with war, but with a gift. A fire stolen, a secret revealed, a wisdom that changes everything, and yet always at a cost. Across myth, the pattern repeats. Knowledge descends from beyond. Humanity grasps it, and the world is never the same. It is a story of gifts that elevate but also corrupt, gifts that bring both light and ruin. In Greece, it is Prometheus, who defies Zeus to bring fire to humankind. With it comes warmth, light, and the first sparks of craft. People shape metal, cook food, and pierce the darkness of night. Yet fire also forges weapons, burns fields, and consumes forests. For his rebellion, Prometheus is chained to a rock, his liver devoured each day by an eagle, his suffering endless. Fire is not condemned, but the one who gave it is punished, as if the act of giving power itself was dangerous. In the Book of Enoch, the watcher Azazel teaches men how to forge blades and shields, and women how to use cosmetics and adornments. Other watchers teach enchantments, astrology, and the properties of plants. These gifts sound almost like the seeds of science: metallurgy, chemistry, astronomy, medicine. But in Enoch's telling, they are the root of corruption. Weapons bring bloodshed, ornaments fuel vanity, sorcery distorts truth, and knowledge of stars leads to hubris. What should have been gradual discovery was delivered in torrents, and humanity was overwhelmed. India's Mahabharata and Ramayana whisper of Vimanas, flying chariots powered by light, carrying warriors across the skies. They describe weapons that shone like 1,000 suns, reducing cities to ash in bursts of fire. The aftermath is chilling: rivers boiling, survivors blinded, hair falling out, fields poisoned for generations. To the modern ear, these passages echo radiation, fallout, and mushroom clouds. Were these only metaphors for divine wrath, or faint memories of technologies unleashed in a forgotten age? Even Egypt carries the same undercurrent. Thoth, guardian of wisdom, was said to keep dangerous secrets in hidden chambers, scrolls on astronomy, medicine, and magic too potent for common use. Some tales claim that when these writings were misused, plagues and chaos followed. To safeguard them, priests concealed the knowledge, revealing only fragments to chosen initiates. Knowledge was not seen as neutral, but as a force demanding reverence, discipline, and secrecy. The Great Pyramid itself may encode this paradox. Its architecture reflects not just monumental ambition, but mathematical constants and celestial alignments that suggest advanced understanding. Was this a symbolic temple, or a time capsule preserving knowledge in stone? If the latter, then it was designed not to be read by its contemporaries, but by a future age capable of understanding without abusing it. The curse of forbidden knowledge is that it cannot be forgotten once revealed. Pandora's box, opened out of curiosity, unleashes sorrows upon the world. The serpent in Eden tempts Eve with the fruit of the tree of knowledge, promising that her eyes will be opened, and indeed they are, but at the price of exile. Again and again, myths suggest that to learn is also to fall. The line between enlightenment and destruction is razor thin. Modern science echoes the same theme. To split the atom brings both electricity and annihilation. To map the genome offers healing, but also manipulation of life itself. Artificial intelligence promises convenience and transformation, but whispers of losing control. Each leap forward feels like a repetition of ancient warnings: the flame of Prometheus, the weapons of the Mahabharata, the arts of the Watchers. We stand where our ancestors once stood, dazzled by knowledge, uncertain of its shadow. Imagine ancient cities lit by powers we no longer recognize, crystals glowing with strange energy, machines humming in temples, astronomical calculations far beyond the naked eye. Perhaps these stories of forbidden gifts are distorted memories of technologies too advanced to sustain, unleashed before humanity was prepared. If so, their loss may have been deliberate. Perhaps sages buried them in vaults, not only to preserve them, but to protect future generations from repeating the same mistakes. The myths preserve not only fear, but longing. They remind us that knowledge is intoxicating. To know the stars, to command fire, to harness hidden forces. These are desires as old as humanity. Yet the stories warn, to grasp too much too soon is to invite collapse. The flood becomes not only punishment, but reset, washing away what was misused. The fire of the gods, once abused, is withdrawn. The curse of forbidden knowledge, then, is not its existence but its timing. Knowledge in the wrong hands at the wrong moment becomes destruction. The ancients wrapped this truth in allegory, hoping we would remember. For if cycles truly repeat, then each age faces the same temptation: to reach for the flame, to open the box, to seize the fruit. And each age risks the same fall. If fragments of that knowledge still linger, in hidden libraries, sealed chambers, or whispered myths, then we stand once more before the same choice. Will we repeat the errors of those before us, or learn to balance the gift with wisdom? The myths do not give answers. They leave us with warnings. And in their silence, one truth echoes. Humanity's story is not only of invention, but of inheritance. Gifts carried from older ages, gifts that bless and curse in equal measure. Beneath desert sands and within mountain halls, myths speak of secret vaults where knowledge was hidden away, preserved for a future age. They tell of scrolls, tablets, and crystalline records, not meant for every hand, but guarded as though the survival of humanity itself depended on their concealment. If civilizations had risen and fallen before, perhaps their survivors understood that wisdom can be both seed and weapon. And so, rather than entrust it to memory alone, they stored it away in sanctuaries of stone and silence. In Egyptian lore, there is the House of Thoth, a chamber said to lie beneath the pyramids, where sacred texts and cosmic laws were preserved. Arab chroniclers such as al-Makrizi and Ibn Abd al-Hakam repeated tales that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb but a library of stone, built under the guidance of Hermes, the Greco-Egyptian form of Thoth. Within it, they claimed, were maps of the stars, records of ancient sciences, and devices from before the flood. If the story is true, the pyramid was never a monument to death, but a time capsule designed to outlast catastrophe. The emerald tablets of Hermes, later cherished by alchemists, are said to contain the secrets of transformation, not only of metals into gold, but of the human soul into divine light. Their origins are uncertain, but the myth insists they were indestructible, written in a substance impervious to decay. Whether allegory or artifact, they symbolize the conviction that the ancients did not want all wisdom to vanish with them. The Greeks too whispered of hidden records. Solon, the Athenian statesman, travelled to Egypt and heard from priests of Sais that his people had forgotten their own history. "You Greeks are children," the priests told him. "You have no old traditions, no knowledge hoary with age." They spoke of civilizations destroyed by fire and flood, of stories remembered in Egypt but lost in Greece. If such memories were guarded by temples, then Egypt was not only a land of kings, but a vault of the world's past. In Jewish tradition, the Ark of the Covenant carried not only the tablets of law, but also a force too powerful for the uninitiated. Those who touched it unprepared were struck down. Was it merely divine presence, or a fragment of technology preserved from an earlier world? Some texts hint that the Ark contained not just commandments, but wisdom encoded in sacred geometry and resonance. A portable library in symbolic form. The Christian era too preserves echoes. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in 1945, contained Gnostic writings long thought lost, buried in clay jars and hidden in the Egyptian desert for over 1,500 years. Among them were Gospels banned by the Church, describing a Christianity far stranger, more mystical, more cosmic than orthodoxy allowed. They remind us that knowledge is often hidden deliberately, locked away not by nature, but by human hands. Elsewhere, myths repeat the same theme. In India, serpent beings called the Nagas are said to guard subterranean palaces filled with golden tablets, records of forgotten cycles of time. In the Andes, legends tell of golden records beneath Lake Titicaca, sealed until humanity is ready. In Mesoamerica, caves leading to Xibalba were said to contain halls of the underworld where the lords of knowledge dwelled. Even in Tibet, stories speak of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom where wisdom survives, veiled from the eyes of the unworthy. Archaeology offers tantalizing glimpses. The library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh held over 30,000 clay tablets, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, astronomical observations, and omens written in cuneiform. Yet scholars admit that many of its texts remain untranslated, their meanings locked in ancient symbols. Who knows what wisdom still sleeps in those fragments? In Egypt, the inventory stela suggests that monuments existed before Khufu, hinting at older structures now buried or erased. Beneath Cappadocia, the vast underground cities of Derinkuyu and Kaimakli stretch for miles, capable of hiding thousands. Were they shelters alone, or also archives of memory? Imagine walking into such a vault. The air is cool and dry, the walls carved smooth. In niches lie tablets of clay, crystal, or gold, each etched with signs whose meaning has been forgotten. Torches flicker against stone pillars carved with constellations, cycles of the stars, instructions for planting and harvest. In sealed alcoves sit objects whose purpose is no longer understood. Spheres of unknown material, gears that interlock with uncanny precision, fragments of knowledge awaiting rediscovery. Such an image is no fantasy, but the echo of stories told in every land. Why hide wisdom at all? Myths offer two answers. First, protection, to preserve knowledge against fire, flood, or the decay of time. Second, caution, to guard it from misuse. The Book of Enoch warns that when knowledge was given too freely, it corrupted humanity and provoked destruction. The keepers of hidden libraries may have chosen secrecy not to hoard power, but to save the world from repeating the same mistakes. The persistence of this theme suggests that somewhere, perhaps still, such vaults exist. They may lie beneath desert sands, under polar ice, or at the bottom of the sea where ancient coastlines now sleep. If uncovered, they could change everything we know, rewriting the origin of civilization, proving that humanity has risen and fallen not once but many times. Until then, they remain only whispers, emerald tablets, golden records, sealed chambers. Fragments of a memory that our ancestors tried to preserve for us. Fragments waiting for the right moment to be revealed. When wisdom is too dangerous for open hands, it retreats into shadow. Across history, whispers follow secret brotherhoods, mystery schools, and esoteric orders. Groups that claim to guard fragments of an older knowledge, passing it from initiate to initiate in symbols, rituals, and veiled teachings. If the sages of old scattered their seeds after the flood, then these societies may have been the gardeners, tending what could not be allowed to die. In ancient Egypt, priesthoods at Heliopolis and Memphis were revered not only for their rituals, but for their hidden libraries. Within temple chambers, only accessible to the initiated, scrolls were said to contain star maps, healing formulas, and records of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods walked with men. To outsiders, the priests performed ceremonies with incense, chants, and processions. But behind closed doors, they preserved fragments of geometry and astronomy, numbers and harmonies that later shaped Pythagoras' philosophy and Greek cosmology. Visitors from abroad describe them as keepers of a wisdom older than their civilization itself. From Egypt, the current flowed into Greece. The figure of Hermes Trismegistus, a fusion of Thoth and Enoch, became the father of Hermetic philosophy. His writings spoke of a universe governed by laws both visible and hidden, a cosmos bound by the maxim, as above, so below. Hermetic teachings promised that through knowledge man could ascend, transforming himself into something divine. Though later dismissed as superstition, these texts carried echoes of ancient science, metaphysics, and the conviction that knowledge itself was a sacred path. The Pythagoreans swore oaths of silence and secrecy. To them, mathematics was not mere calculation, but the key to creation itself. The harmony of music, the proportions of geometry, the orbit of planets, all were manifestations of a divine order. Their society functioned like a mystery school, each stage of initiation revealing deeper truths. The pentagram, their sacred symbol, represented health, proportion, and hidden unity. It is said they traced their knowledge to Egypt and Babylon, carrying fragments of an inheritance that predated their own culture. Later, the thread surfaces in the Gnostics, early Christians who believed salvation came not from faith alone, but from gnosis, secret knowledge of divine origins. To them, the world was ruled by archons, lesser beings who blinded humanity, and only those who pierced the veil could return to the true source. Their scriptures, buried in the sands of Nag Hammadi and rediscovered in 1945, describe visions of luminous beings, cosmic battles, and hidden truths about creation. Suppressed by orthodoxy, their writings remind us that history itself is often shaped by what is silenced. In medieval Europe, guardianship of hidden wisdom took new forms. The Knights Templar, famed for their wealth and secrecy, were accused of heresies that hinted at possession of relics or texts unearthed from Solomon's temple. Rumours claimed they discovered scrolls beneath Jerusalem, perhaps even knowledge linking back to Egypt or Sumer. Their sudden rise, their cryptic symbols, and their violent suppression left behind a trail of unanswered questions. The Rosicrucians emerged in the 17th century with manifestos promising hidden wisdom of the ancients, combining science, mysticism, and prophecy. They spoke of secret brotherhoods scattered across Europe, guardians of knowledge waiting until the world was ready. Closely intertwined with them were the Freemasons, whose lodges drew upon symbols of architecture, geometry, and light. Their rituals invoked twin pillars, compasses, and the all-seeing eye, echoes of temples and cosmologies from a much older world. Were these inventions of the Enlightenment, or deliberate continuations of older mysteries concealed in new forms? Even outside Europe, similar currents flowed. In Tibet, initiates spoke of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom where wisdom is preserved until humanity can wield it without destruction. In West Africa, secret societies like the Poro and Sande maintained oral traditions and sacred symbols that carried fragments of cosmology. In the Americas, Mesoamerican priesthoods guarded star calendars and codices, many destroyed by conquest but rumoured to survive in secret caches. Imagine initiation into such a society. You are led by torchlight into an underground chamber. Symbols carved into the walls glow faintly in the flame's flicker. Stars, serpents, geometric patterns. A hooded figure speaks words known only to the initiated. You are shown diagrams of proportions, chants of power, cycles of the heavens. You understand only fragments, but you sense the weight of memory stretching back to ages long before your own. Such experiences bound initiates not only to secrecy, but to continuity, to the conviction that they were carrying an ember of fire from a forgotten age. Why hide knowledge at all? The answer is consistent across cultures. To protect it. Knowledge too great for the unready brings ruin. The Watchers gave metallurgy and enchantments, and violence consumed the world. Prometheus gave fire, and Zeus feared mankind's ambition. Atlantis, in Plato's account, fell when its wisdom turned to pride. Each cycle of catastrophe reinforces the same lesson. Wisdom must be preserved, but also restrained. Perhaps these societies never held the full truth. Perhaps they held only fragments, chants, symbols, rituals that preserved memory without complete understanding. But fragments are enough. They remind us that behind the veil of history, another story waits, one of guardians and stewards, ensuring that when cycles turn and floods return, something survives. Even today, the language of secrecy endures. University fraternities echo Masonic rites. Scientific institutions guard discoveries until the world is ready. Military projects conceal technologies that seem decades ahead of their time. The guardianship of knowledge has not vanished, it has merely changed form. And so, Secret societies across ages remind us of a haunting truth. The greatest danger to humanity may not be ignorance, but knowledge itself. To know too much too soon is to invite collapse. To guard that knowledge, patiently, secretly, may be the only way to ensure it survives until a future more prepared than the past. The night sky is the oldest book humanity has ever read. Long before ink, before parchment, before clay tablets, people lifted their eyes to the stars and found meaning written in light. But in the myths and monuments of antiquity, the sky is more than a canvas for imagination. It is a record of knowledge so advanced, so precise, that it unsettles our notion of what ancient peoples should have known. The Sumerians distinguished planets from stars, charting their wandering paths across the heavens. They recorded the cycles of Jupiter, even using a form of geometry akin to calculus to predict its movement, over 1,000 years before modern mathematics claimed such discoveries. On clay tablets now stored in museums, lists of constellations and celestial omens stretch with uncanny accuracy. To the Sumerians, astronomy was not separate from daily life. It was woven into kingship, agriculture, and law. The stars were clocks, calendars, and prophecies all at once. How did a people so early in recorded history acquire such detailed knowledge? The Babylonians, heirs of Sumer, carried this wisdom further. Their astronomer priests tracked lunar eclipses and planetary conjunctions with remarkable precision. They created the zodiac, dividing the sky into 12 parts still used in astrology and astronomy today. When Alexander the Great's armies marched east, Greek philosophers encountered this knowledge and marveled at its depth. Some suspected it wasn't the invention of Babylonia at all, but inheritance from an even older age. In Egypt, astronomy is written in stone. The shafts of the Great Pyramid align with Orion's belt and Sirius. Temples like Karnak are oriented to solstices and equinoxes. The Dendera zodiac, carved on a temple ceiling, maps the heavens with constellations strikingly similar to our modern charts. The Egyptians tied their calendar to the heliacal rising of Sirius, predicting the Nile flood with accuracy that modern science only confirmed much later. Their mythology bound Osiris to Orion, Isis to Sirius, suggesting that the gods themselves were mirrored in the stars. Were these alignments symbolic, or were they deliberate markers of cosmic cycles meant to outlast dynasties? Across the ocean, the Maya and Aztecs achieved astronomical mastery that still astonishes scholars. The Mayan calendar interlocked cycles of 260, 365, and thousands of years, predicting eclipses and planetary motions centuries in advance. Their temples were not only shrines but observatories. El Caracol at Chichen Itza contains windows aligned with Venus, the planet they tracked obsessively. To them, Venus was not only a light in the sky, but a cosmic clock guiding wars and rituals. In their myths, each age, each sun, ended in catastrophe, a belief that bound their astronomy to cycles of destruction and renewal. The Dogon people of Mali preserve knowledge even harder to explain. Their oral traditions describe Sirius as a binary system, with a companion star invisible to the naked eye. They knew it was dense, heavy, and orbited in 50 years. Yet Sirius B was only confirmed by telescopes in the 19th century. Anthropologists debated whether this was coincidence, influence, or something stranger. The Dogon insist it was knowledge given to them by the Nommo, beings who came from the sky in a vessel of fire. If true, their astronomy is not the result of observation, but of transmission. The Hopi of North America align their rituals to the movements of the Pleiades, believing their ancestors came from beneath the earth guided by star beings. The Polynesians navigated across thousands of miles of open ocean, using star maps memorized in chants, steering by constellations with accuracy rivaling modern instruments. Their knowledge of the sky was not written, but sung, passed from generation to generation, ensuring survival on journeys across the vast Pacific. Even in Europe, echoes of ancient astronomy endure. Stonehenge, erected in Neolithic Britain, aligns with the solstices, capturing the sunrise on the longest and shortest days of the year. Its massive stones function as a calendar, tracking the turning of the seasons. Similar stone circles dot Ireland, Scotland and Brittany, their orientations fixed to lunar and solar events. The builders left no writing, but their monuments speak a silent language of the sky. Why did so many cultures tie their greatest works to the heavens? Perhaps it was reverence. Perhaps survival demanded it. Planting, harvest, migration all depend on cycles of sun and moon. Yet the precision goes beyond necessity. Alignments to specific stars, encoding of long cycles, and predictions of rare events suggest a memory of cosmic patterns already known. It is as if humanity inherited a star map, fragments of which were preserved in temples, myths, and chants. Imagine standing among the stones of Teotihuacan as Venus rises, its brilliance mirrored in the pyramid of the feathered serpent. Or beneath the Egyptian night sky, watching Sirius appear on the horizon as priests proclaim the coming flood. Or beside a Dogon elder, listening as he describes the invisible companion of a star brighter than all others. These are not random glimpses of the sky, but deliberate transmissions, knowledge carried like flame through ages of darkness. The true origin of humanity may not be told only in myths of giants or wars of gods, but in the silent precision of the heavens. For the stars are eternal. They rise and set as they did for the Sumerians, for the Egyptians, for the Maya. And within their light may lie the oldest memory of all, that we are heirs to a cosmic knowledge, fragments of which still whisper to us each night. And yet where there is memory of science, there are also anomalies, artifacts scattered like puzzle pieces, objects that should not exist in the times to which they belong. To follow the trail of forbidden knowledge further, we must turn from the stars to the earth, to relics buried in museums, basements, and myths, the out-of-place artifacts that hint at civilizations erased. Scattered through museums, private collections, and dusty excavation records are objects that do not belong. They are fragments of technology, geometry, or craftsmanship that seem to leap centuries, even millennia, ahead of their time. Archaeologists often label them curiosities, mistakes, or outright forgeries. Yet taken together, they whisper of civilizations that held knowledge far greater than we are willing to admit. The most famous is the Antikythera mechanism, pulled from a shipwreck off the Greek island in 1901. Corroded and broken, it looked like little more than a lump of bronze until X-rays revealed intricate gears within. Gears that calculated planetary motions, eclipses, and Olympiad cycles. 2,000 years old, it is a mechanical computer, centuries before such devices were invented. How many more might have been lost to the sea? In Iraq, a small clay jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod was unearthed in the 1930s. Known as the Baghdad battery, it appears capable of generating electrical current when filled with acidic liquid. Official explanations range from ritual container to accidental design, but experiments show it could power a weak charge. Did ancient craftsmen stumble upon electricity, or were they imitating something they no longer fully understood? Maps, too, raise questions. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, depicts coastlines of South America with uncanny accuracy, and even appears to show Antarctica free of ice. Yet Antarctica has been covered in ice for thousands of years. How could a Renaissance cartographer have drawn it unless he had access to older inherited charts, copies of maps from a civilization long gone? In India, the Vedic epics describe Vimanas, flying machines powered by fire and light. The Mahabharata speaks of weapons that blazed like 1,000 suns, scorching battlefields with heat so intense that rivers boiled. Scholars treat these as poetic allegories. Yet the details, mushroom clouds, blindness, poisoned land, feel disturbingly modern. Are these echoes of technologies forgotten, recorded in the only language available at the time? Even in South America, stonework defies explanation. At Pumapunku, blocks of andesite, harder than steel, are carved with interlocking H shapes and precise drill holes. They lie scattered as though torn apart by catastrophe. To this day, no one can explain how they were cut, transported, or fitted without advanced tools. Local myths insist they were built in a single night by gods or giants. These anomalies are often dismissed individually. Coincidence, misinterpretation, hoax, but collectively they suggest something more. Fragments of a lost inheritance. If civilizations before us reached higher than we allow, their works would not survive intact. They would survive as puzzles, scattered across time like broken shards of a mirror, each reflecting a piece of a forgotten whole. The existence of such artifacts aligns with the theme of forbidden knowledge. They are not simply curiosities. They are reminders that our history may not be the first telling of civilization. Perhaps we are walking a cycle, rediscovering technologies once known, once lost, and perhaps once punished. And so we arrive at a more intimate legacy, not tools of stone or metal, but bloodlines themselves. For myths insist that when the floodwaters receded, something of the ancient ones remained, carried not only in ruins, but in the veins of kings and dynasties. Among the most haunting claims of antiquity is that fragments of the ancient beings did not vanish with the flood. Instead, they lingered in human bloodlines, passed down through dynasties that claimed descent from gods, giants, or star-born teachers. If ruins preserved knowledge in stone, then rulers preserved it in flesh, binding their authority to a lineage that was more than human. The Sumerian king list tells us that before the flood, kings ruled for tens of thousands of years. These figures, shrouded in myth, are described as shepherds chosen by the gods, semi-divine rulers who bridged heaven and earth. After the flood, reigns shortened dramatically, yet the aura of divine inheritance remains. Kingship, the tablets insist, descended from heaven. Egypt followed the same pattern. Pharaohs were not merely rulers, but incarnations of Horus, sons of Ra, embodiments of divine power in human form. Their bloodlines were carefully guarded, marriages arranged to keep sacred descent intact. To rule Egypt was to stand as mediator between gods and men, a role echoing the hybrid offspring of the Watchers and humans in the Book of Enoch. In Europe, whispers of otherworldly descent surface in medieval chronicles. The Merovingian dynasty of France was rumoured to spring from a sea being, their kings marked by a mysterious birthright. In Ireland, rulers traced ancestry to the Tuatha De Danann, radiant beings remembered as immortals who retreated into hidden hills. Folklore speaks of luminous skin, strange eyes, or extraordinary lifespans, details that sound less like invention and more like memory of mingled blood. Even the Bible preserves unsettling hints. There were giants in the earth in those days, Genesis tells us, and also afterward, Waiti. The Anakim and Rephaim, descendants of the Nephilim, are described as formidable foes of Israel. David's battle with Goliath is remembered not only as metaphor, but as the slaying of a warrior over 9 feet tall, clad in armour no ordinary man could bear. These were not only myths but genealogies, naming tribes as if they truly existed. Could such claims reflect reality? Science now tells us that fragments of DNA survive across ages. Neanderthal traces in modern humans, Denisovan echoes in our blood. If unknown lineages once mingled with humanity, their legacy might still flow silently through us, unnoticed yet potent. Perhaps the sudden appearance of genius, of leaders who shifted the course of civilizations, carries an echo of something more. Archaeology adds fuel to this suspicion. In 1881, skeletal remains over 7 feet tall were uncovered near the Nile, their skulls unusually large. Reports of giant bones appeared across America in the 19th century, only to vanish into obscurity. If such discoveries were authentic, they threatened the neat narrative of human origins. And so they disappeared, quietly archived, hidden, or dismissed. The persistence of these bloodline myths may be more than metaphor. They reflect an ancient anxiety that humanity is not fully its own, that we are heirs not only to forgotten civilizations, but to forgotten ancestors. The true origin of humanity may be hybrid, a mingling of mortal and other. And if some bloodlines survived, carefully guarded in temples, palaces, or secret societies, then the past may not be entirely gone. It may still walk among us, veiled by time, yet waiting for recognition. Which brings us to the final theme, cycles, for myths do not end with bloodlines. They tell us that civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, each cycle carrying fragments of what came before. To understand humanity's true origin, we must see history not as a straight line, but as an endless circle, flood after flood, fire after fire, memory after memory. Night stretches across the earth, and the stars burn with the same light seen by Sumerian priests, Egyptian astronomers, and Mayan calendar keepers. Their patterns have not changed. Orion still rises, Sirius still glimmers, the Pleiades still shimmer as jewels in the dark. In this constancy lies a paradox. The heavens endure, while the civilizations beneath them rise and fall like waves upon a shore. Myths insist this rhythm is no accident. The Mayan long count calendar speaks of suns, successive ages destroyed by water, fire, and quake, each followed by renewal. Hindu cosmology describes vast yugas, cycles of creation and destruction spanning millions of years. Norse traditions tell of Ragnarok, an ending that is also a beginning. Even the Bible remembers a flood that swept the slate clean, a covenant promising survival but not freedom from judgment. Everywhere the same truth surfaces. History does not move in a straight line, but in spirals. Perhaps this is why forbidden knowledge is always veiled, hidden, or punished. Too much wisdom too soon can unbalance the cycle, drawing catastrophe. The Watchers gave secrets and were bound. Prometheus gave fire and was chained. Atlantis, in Plato's telling, misused its power and was swallowed by the sea. These stories are less warnings than patterns. Knowledge rises, hubris follows, collapse sweeps it away. What remains are fragments, scrolls, ruins, whispers, seeds planted for the next cycle. Today, we stand within another moment of ascent. We split the atom, splice genes, and send machines to the edge of the solar system. Our knowledge grows faster than our wisdom. The ancients may have walked this path before, their monuments and myths the echoes of warnings we have not yet learned to heed. If they could speak, perhaps they would remind us that floods come not only as water, but as fire, silence, or forgetting. Yet even in collapse, something always survives. A remnant carries the flame. 7 sages appear. A single family builds an ark. A wanderer preserves the hymns of the gods. A scribe ascends into the heavens so knowledge will not be lost. The cycle does not end, it turns. Humanity is fragile, but memory is resilient. The ruins endure, the stars endure, the whispers endure. And so we return to where we began. Whispers before history, fragments of myth and stone that tell us our origins, are not as simple as we are told. We are not merely the children of chance, nor solely of divine design. We are heirs to forgotten civilizations, to forbidden knowledge, to cycles of rise and fall that stretch beyond memory. What then is the true origin of humanity? Perhaps it is not a single event but a pattern, repeating endlessly, each time leaving behind hints for those willing to listen. Perhaps we are not at the beginning at all, but in the middle of a story as old as time. The stars above us keep their vigil. The ruins beneath our feet keep their silence. And between them we walk, remembering fragments, forgetting others, waiting for the next turning of the cycle. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time?